What's the thing that you really want people to know as people with ADHD about friendship?
What matters is surrounding yourself with people who want to see your light shine and want to magnify that light, and people who you do that for as well, right? Because friendship is just like any other relationship, it's a two-way street. It's not just about what you get, it's about what you give. But the other part of that giving piece is that's also part of what makes us feel good, is when we know we've given something to somebody else, when we know we've contributed in a positive way to somebody else's life.
Hello, and welcome to the ADHD Social Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Carolyn Maguire. And before we get into it, this is part 2 of my conversation with ADHD expert, Dr. Carolyn Parcells. In part 2, we will go deep into ADHD, friendship, and finding your people. And it is a very uplifting episode. Carolyn, like me, is dyslexic. We've had some very similar experiences and we had great fun. But if you are diving in and you did not come to part 1 of this conversation, go back and watch part 1 and then come back to part 2. Let's get into it. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did.
It's so hard to be a parent, period, paragraph, end of story, regardless of who your kids are. But when your kids are neurodivergent and or you're neurodivergent and or combination thereof, it just adds to the complexity, right?
Absolutely.
And on the one hand, and you and I know this from the resilience literature, right? Like, we don't want to be lawnmower parents, as they call it. Like, we don't want to clear the way for them, because you need to go through challenges. You need to go through difficulties to build character, to build confidence, to build competence, to know that you can. And so there's sometimes it can be difficult to say, okay, well, how do I advocate for my child and make sure they know I have their back, and yet not do it for them? Not take away every single barrier or every single blockade. And that's one of the things where like I said, I don't know that my dad even really realized what he was doing in the moment, or how impactful of a core memory that was going to be. But I also really appreciate, as I got older, knowing what actually happened, because again, it gives me, as a parent myself now trying to navigate somewhat similar situations. Again, how do I hold my kids accountable and let them know they don't need me to be the one that fights for them all the time, because they can advocate for themselves, and give them empower them to do that. And at the same time, make sure they know they've got us in their corner, and that there are going to be times where sometimes they need to call in the big guns, if you will, where they need to call mom and dad, or they need to ask for our help. And I tell patients and parents this all the time, and I tell my own kids this, is, one of the most important skills any of us can learn is how and when and who to ask for help, because none of us do it alone.
Oh, I love that sentiment, because it is so true. And I don't think my parents got really involved. My parents did not really get involved with the various bullying and school dramas. And so I'm super in love with your dad for doing that. I hope you call him today and tell him what a great dad he was. But I also want to say that
Father's Day.
Call on Father's Day. As a parent myself now, and somebody who works with parents, that is absolutely the biggest thing. I think there are times when we have to go in, and I do think there are times where kids just need to know we have their back.
Yeah.
And then I think there are times when we can role play and help write the text or the email and say, this is what I would say and this is what I would do. And there's such something, my daughter, and she doesn't mind me talking about this stuff because she's very out as ADHD. She made a video with Jessica, so she's out.
Oh, fun.
She just texted me earlier today, even though they're not supposed to text from school. We text each other all day long. She said, it's all set up. I moved from this, course into AP stats. I'm all set with this. She felt so good about herself that she did that herself, that she went in and she did it herself. But I had been the one last night who was before they shut down, before school shuts down, I would just, you're on the wait list, but I would one more time try to ping them. I didn't do it for her. but I did play executive function for a minute and say, hey, it's Friday, we're moving into the end of the school year, let's remember that they're leaving, you know.
We actually had a very similar situation for my high schooler, and an honors class, towards the end of the school year, and it was the same kind of thing. I said, okay, so what's the process? And he's like, well, the process is to appeal. I've already submitted that. I was like, awesome, dude. I was like, now are we going to go talk to the teacher, write an email to follow up? And he's like, that's probably a good idea. I was like, cool. I did email his advisor, and I usually tell him if I'm going to email anybody. I was like, hey, I'm just going to email your advisor so I can ask what the process, just so I understand, so that if you need any assistance from me, I know what the process is. And he was like, yeah, absolutely. So like, I'll do that kind of stuff. Or I'll ask them, hey, you got this, or do you need me to follow up with you? Do you need me to remind you, or do you need me to send an email too? You know? And it's, yeah, having high schoolers, man, it is
It's something.
it's something, and it's really something for me because I specialize, right, in adolescents and young adults. So a lot of my patients are high schoolers, junior high schoolers, and college students. And yeah, it's different when it's yours.
It's super different when it's yours. It's super different when it's yours. And like, I do think though that all the years of working with teenagers and college students and young adults has paid off, in the sense that I do know some things from it, and I
Yes.
know how they feel about stuff.
Yes.
And stuff, but it is, I always say this every day. I say, you do the best you can, and then tomorrow you get up and you start again. And I think, to pretend, one of the things that's always driven me bonkers is people who pretend they're very perfect, like parenting experts who pretend they're perfect. And I'm like, that does no one any good, because then other parents feel shame, and they shouldn't feel shame because we're not perfect.
Well, and here's the other thing I'm going to tell you, as someone who takes care of the children of people who present themselves as perfect. They're not.
No. No.
I guarantee you. No one's perfect. No one's situation is perfect. No one's kids are perfect. No one's parenting is perfect. I like what you said about, we do the best we can and we get up the next day and we do it again. Some of the moments that I was the most proud of my oldest this year was when we faced some challenges and we faced some difficulties. And I say they did. And although I felt it too in my very soul and in my bones, and it took all of my willpower to sit on my hands and keep my mouth shut. But watching them go through that stuff is so hard as a parent, whether it's the social stuff, whether it's the academic stuff, whatever it is. But then when they come through the other side and they've done it themselves and they're proud of themselves, that's pretty cool.
It's
That's pretty
very
awesome.
cool. It's very cool. And I think that now that I understand the original Carolyn and her original stuff,
My
um,
origin story.
your origin story, no, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense with like who you've become, right? And like that origin story makes sense. And I think, one of the things I love is that you were diagnosed at 17, because that's kind of so rare for a woman of our era, um, for Gen X. But I also think it's like really great because you've had all this time to know.
Yes. One of the things that I think is really interesting, though, because one of the things I get asked to speak on, now is not just like, treatment of ADHD, medications, that kind of stuff, but being a woman with ADHD, right? Being a mother and a physician and a business owner. And what's really interesting is, while I am very grateful that I was diagnosed as young as I was, I'm very grateful that I got all the support that I did. It's still really hard. And I tell people, I'm very honest about this, that I feel like my ADHD causes me more challenges now than at possibly any other point in my life, right? Because I'm responsible for so many humans and so many calendars and so much executive function. And not only that, but there's that feeling as women, I think, that we carry so much of the weight of the world and our households and our children and our spouses and everybody on our shoulders, whether we should or not, whether we're being asked to or not. we do. And so as a result, when something falls through the cracks, you know, when I was a young adult or a teenager or a kid, if something fell through the cracks or I didn't do something quite right or quite to my own satisfaction or the satisfaction of those around me, I the only person that suffered was myself, right? But now it's not just me, you know? And that responsibility that we feel and the challenges that society puts on us as women in general, I think for those of us with ADHD is what all of that really fuels that shame that we can feel as folks with ADHD, but in particular as women with ADHD. And so I wonder, there's definitely those times where I wonder, like, again, I'm so grateful that I had that knowledge and I had that support and I've had that knowledge throughout. You know, it's what would have happened if I didn't?
I
You
think
know?
I think we know what would happen. Like the women that I see who are just discovering now in their 50s, 60s,
Yeah.
40s, they have so much shame.
Yes.
Like my attitude is very much this. There's too much cognitive load placed on me. I don't love it. Um, I am responsible for many people, many things. I am running multiple businesses and like I prioritize and triage things and not everybody loves that. Like sometimes
Yeah.
something that you want is not my priority, but I feel like that's partly cuz I'm coming from a state where I know my needs and I know my limits and I know what I need to be the calm parent that I want to be and that's my priority. Like that is 100% my priority. But I think that that's because I've known about my ADHD. I was diagnosed at 12, but I didn't know because a certain institution in Boston told my parents I was a girl and it wasn't important. So when I was 25, when I worked for Johnson and Johnson, they were launching a drug called Concerta. Was when I really figured it out. I sat in a ballroom and I listened to people talk about ADHD, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is me!" And I went upstairs during a break and I called my mom and said, don't I have that ADHD thing? And my mom was like, yes. And they said that it would go away, but like it doesn't seem to have gone away. And so like but I've known since I was 25, right? So since I've been 25, I've had that knowledge of like executive function and the burdens and whatever. And so I still do feel completely overwhelmed, but I don't carry the same shame as if I had been told like, you're broken and there's something wrong with you,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Exactly.
I think that that's, of course, people feel, you know, really terrible because nobody said to them, like, you're okay. And it's okay that you can't, my analogy is always, Carolyn, that like I don't buy lettuce that you have to like wash. I buy like the bags of lettuce because even though it's better to buy the other lettuce, I'm not going to wash it and it's just going to die in the crisper. So like, who are we kidding?
Yeah.
But I think that's because we're empowered. But if we didn't know, we wouldn't be empowered.
Exactly. Exactly. No, I think that's exactly right.
What's the thing that you really want people to know as people with ADHD about friendship? Because you've had sort of all of these different phases of friendship you've talked about.
Yeah. I think the most important thing to know about friendship, oh, is it doesn't matter as much somebody else, like we said before, has ADHD or doesn't have ADHD or is neurodiverse or isn't neurodiverse. What matters is surrounding yourself with people who want to see your light shine and want to magnify that light, and people who you do that for as well, right? Because friendship is just like any other relationship. It's a two-way street. It's not just about what you get, it's about what you give. But the other part of that giving piece is that's also part of what makes us feel good, is when we know we've given something to somebody else, when we know we've contributed in a positive way to somebody else's life. And so to have that back and forth, and I say equal, but that doesn't mean it's equal all the time, right? But that in that friendship, in that relationship, you both lift each other up and you both respect each other and you both care about each other and you both love each other, and there's going to be times where you are not in a position to be to give as much, and that person is there to help lift you up, and then there's going to be times where those tables are turned and they may not be able to give as much, but you're there to lift them up.
That's beautiful. I love that. That's Carolyn. That's gorgeous.
Thank you.
I'm so glad we got to talk. I'm so glad we got to talk. It's a great way to spend today.